Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the main auditorium. How can architecture and public space capture the essence of a city? That is the conversation that we're all about to have. We start this afternoon with a keynote conversation. Let me just show you around the main auditorium in case you're not familiar with it. Some walking is required. If you are close to this microphone here, you'll need to use it for the Q&A. There is a microphone here for the Q&A as well. Stand up, the mic is live, no need to tap it, no need to say un, dos, tres. They are working, I promise you. I wouldn't do that to you. And the microphone there. Hello, good afternoon. Are you ready for the Q&A? Oh, okay, great. Do I need to send a doctor in that direction? Are you okay? All right, fantastic. Whew. Don't scare me like that. All right. So, for the keynote conversation this afternoon, I am so delighted to have on the stage Benedetta Tagliabue and also Martha Thorne. Ladies, please join us.
Benedetta, here we are again together. It's a pleasure for me to welcome you, or you to welcome me to your city. We're going to talk about public space in cities, but introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your work first.
Well, I'm Benedetta Tagliabue. I arrived here as a young architect from Italy. And then it was 30 years ago, and I'm still here working as an architect in Barcelona and in many other places in the world. So I think I'm an Italian from Barcelona, but very cosmopolitan.
And Benedetta, I know you've also spoken at graduation at my school, i.e. School of Architecture and Design. And you bring out several themes in all our conversations. And of course, public space is one of those important ones. There are many concepts of public space, and there's a lot of knowledge that we can bring to public space. Why don't you start the conversation? Because you were telling me this morning something about Venice, which is a place close to your heart and to all of our hearts.
Well, actually, I studied in Venice, and I learned a lot about that city directly because I love it. And in these days, I was kind of, everybody was receiving these images, which are kind of, in the same time funny, in the same time a disaster, you know, of this city floating. And I know that in the past, city of Venice, the Republic of Venice, had one main concern, which was water, you know? You have a city which is based on a miracle, which is living together with water, but you have to know that you have to control, you have to be on top. So the magistrati alle acque, which were the important people of in concern of water in Venice, they were the most powerful one in the Republic, which means they knew that that theme was so important, and they were always looking about the equilibrium of the water and the city. So now we forgot about that. No? We make a big show about it. Actually, in the 30s, 40s, Venice lent new lands for an industrial part. They open up the openings from the sea towards Venice. Big cruise lines are getting in. And now we are so cynical and say, oh, the city is floating. Well, of course, we have done it. And we are inventing big machines in order to stop that. It's not the way. This is maybe not smart. Maybe it's technological, but it's not so smart. I think it's much smarter to have a kind of looking after things, to be on top, to give priorities to what needs to have the priority. And so I think this is a kind of a nice way to, to start our conversation, which will deal with much more themes. Of course, the public space and how the city deals with the cities is very important. But this, I think, is kind of making us reflecting. And we can all reflect together on something which is happening now.
Absolutely. It brings up many themes, and one has to do with how do we think of a city? What makes a city? Is it the architecture? Is it the public space? Is it a touristic experience? Is it what we read in the newspaper? How do you approach it from your firm?
You know, being an architect is kind of sometimes difficult to generalize a concept. And we are architects who always work in a specific situation. So we know that the circumstance is so important and can make things change. So adapting to circumstances is one of the main things. But also the main thing is to keep in mind that you're mainly doing a transformation which is dealing with the happiness of people. So this is also something which we always keep in mind. And the physical way that this can happen in different places can be different, no? And going around in the world, we have this possibility of bringing ideas which maybe are working very well in some place, adapting to other places, and trying to see how they work. No? Because there's not one formula that you can bring all over the world and say, this is perfect everywhere. No, there are formulas that you have to adapt. And the adaptation to us, which are designers and architects, is the fun part. We love to have different solutions and different ways of acting in different parts of the world.
But Benedetta, there has to be something sort of universal in when you talk about making people happy. And maybe it's not formally the same solution, but what makes people happy in a public space? What are you trying to achieve? Is it the ability that they can interact with it, that they can control it? What is it? Because if formally, or how you approach the concept of public space in different countries, as you build in China as well as in Europe, there has to be an underlying essence. That
this is something, I think this question is the one we are keeping inside us, because it's not a question you can say, this and this and this makes people happy. That's it. Well, no, it's a kind of a blend of many different possibilities. And I try to discover it little by little in the many experiences we have, looking at other ways of acting in the city, trying to discover every time we do a new project. And I think it's really a kind of a little discovery that we do every time. And every one of these projects that we have in a loop here, which are part of our portfolio experience, things that we are doing, have different discoveries. No? For example, we have here the Santa Caterina market. This was our neighborhood in Barcelona, and it was a very poor neighborhood. And we decided to live here, but when we had the opportunity to act as architects here, it was really trying first to understand the situation, what had been happening in history, why the piece of city was running down, how we could respond to this. And the project is a city project, which means there are a lot of actors in it. Mm-hmm. The neighbors living here, but also the city, the different departments of the city, and how a new design can blend and maybe make differences disappear and make something like a sort of joy entering the space. So we were kind of surprised when we did this big colored roof. Maybe we thought we exaggerated a little with the introduction of the joy. But then we were very happy to see that it had a great response. So people noticed that. People recognized the fact that there was a kind of an opening towards a joyful embrace of a different public, and this worked.
And clearly in this case as well, people can identify the building. They can identify not only the functional uses, but also the architectural ones. So what is the role of buildings in creating a city or a memorable place for people?
Yeah, some buildings have this necessity of kind of identifying the place, or maybe give a character to the neighborhood, to the situation. Some other buildings, like this one, this is a very small building next to an hospital, has the necessity to make people arrive there and feel at home. You know, this is part of the Maggie networks. Maggie is a very good idea, which happened to one landscape designer called Maggie Keswick. And she realized while she was ill that being in a hospital and feeling like, anonymous was very dangerous, very terrible. So she was imagining to have little centers next to a hospital where you can make a cup of tea. And the fact of making a cup of tea in a situation where you are in an hospital, it's very different, because then you feel at home, you feel in power with yourself, you feel that you can have your comfort moment. And an idea as simple as that is really, really very powerful. So the building doesn't need to be enormous, very visible, but needs to be very comfortable, very beautiful, mingled with landscape, in order to give to the cancer treatment people another kind of feeling.
So what you're saying to me, Benedetta, is the important thing is not always the building as form, or not just the public space in a formal sense, but a few things that you've said. It's one where people feel empowered to act, to be themselves, to engage maybe with others or with the environment. You also seem to talk about the importance of spaces as well as buildings having a cultural component, connecting with the past and somehow linking us to those maybe sometimes invisible things of culture, of climate, of topography, things that may not be obvious, but are part of our connection to a place.
Absolutely. I think the culture is very important. In a way, we have so many layers which are inside us, and so many layers which are inside places, that had been happening into places. So whenever we act, we love to look at the past and look at past maps and understand what had been happening on the place, because usually places have a strong personality, and sometimes we don't see it. So.
But what about the current users? They may not even be aware of that. Does that bother you?
The
current users of a space may not know the history, may not be aware of it.
Not consciously maybe, but I think things are kind of there, So also when you are transforming a place, it's kind of important to try to understand it first and then be able to make the transformation. Mm-hmm. So for example, we have been working also in existing places like the harbor in Hamburg. And for example, you need to transform that from being a harbor which receives a lot of boats, a lot of goods, into a place where people feels at home. It's not so easy, because the dimension of a person is very different than the dimension of a big boat.
Absolutely.
But then you have to invent ways, no, to make this transformation.
Right. That brings up another point and brings us back a little bit to Venice and the idea that with an enormous dam to control the water would have been seen at one time as a solution, and clearly it's not. And I'm sure because many of us are here at this wonderful event to learn more about technology, it brings to mind the fact that making cities nowadays is not just the area of the architect or urbanist or the public sector. There are many, many more people influencing how our cities are, from the engineers who made the dam in Venice to many other companies. My own home country of the United States, the private sector is enormously powerful in creating the city. And it's really interesting. Just about a month ago, Shaina Dor from Sidewalk Labs. Sidewalk Labs is a sister company of Google, which has won a request for proposals to develop part of Toronto. So in the case of Sidewalk Labs, this is a quasi-tech company which is now developing the lakefront, part of the lakefront, which is public space in some ways of a major North American city. And next to that, we can see neighborhood groups sometimes have a lot of power, or different organizations. How do you see the city, and how do you see the role of the architect in this changing landscape?
Well, we have noticed this change in thinking about cities and about transformations in the city with more agents working together, no? Because years ago, maybe 20 or 30 years ago, when we were doing competitions, it was the architects thinking about what would be the design. Now we never do that. We always meet in a team and collect the information and work together in teams, because there are so many factors to keep in mind, and we cannot be on top of everything. No, it's very important to learn. So I think it's one of the best part when we design this. This is a kind of a design that is happening. This is Shenzhen asking teams of architects and other specialists to give proposal for a new part of the city. And in this case, we have to create teams. And I think the best part of it is that we are learning a lot. Of course, we are learning about new ways of saving energies, new ways of constructing, new technologies. And this is really fantastic, no? Really fantastic.
But a question, Benedetta. One of the first words you said in our session was about equilibrium. Do you think there can be equilibrium in teams?
Equilibrium.
And how do you achieve that?
Yesterday night, I was in the opening party for the Smart City Congress, and it was very lovely. I met very interesting people, of course, with other professions than mine. And one of them was telling me that it was actually studied that when you have a different kind of population, if you have a kind of an equilibrium in the group deciding, then usually the result is much better. No? So there is a possibility to study this. And I think it's really interesting, because I really believe that this kind of equilibrium between differences is something so important, and that it's very complex. It can bring to conflict, but it's very interesting when this actually brings to a better result. So I believe that this mingling with harmony is a kind of the key for our future.
So that brings me back to another point. If you have a lot of diversity, diverse points of view, people from different places coming together and creating a new project, and as you said, it's not always in harmony. On the other hand, another question is, would you lose the identity of a place if it is so?
This is not so easy, no? It's clear that with our architecture, we don't want to lose the identity. We are not proposing a type of architecture which is the same everywhere, at the reverse. I think keeping own characters, identity is very important. And there is this kind of mystery, how to create an harmonious group, maintaining a little bit of your own character. Mm-hmm. It's not an easy question, I think the diversity is the source of fights, but it can be also the source of progress in civilization.
Absolutely, and I think especially when we think of diversity, an Italian and a North American sitting here on stage in front of people from many other places, it's really exciting. Benedetta, I think we have just a little bit of time left in this session. Talk to me a little bit more about how you see the city of the future and the role of public space in the city of the future, especially because we see lots of changes, lots of unrest around the world. What is your hope and what do you expect?
Well, it's not so easy when I have a question like this and say, oh, I'm afraid. It's also difficult to say what is the city of the future. But for example, these drawings are corresponding to a proposal we are doing for the development of a region at north of Chengdu in China. And what we tried when we were asked to how to develop this valley, to follow the lines of the valley, to make maybe new cities which were understanding the topography, which were understanding the culture, which were kind of embracing. And when we had to respond to this theme of new cities, better lives, when we did the Shanghai Expo in China, we responded with a building made of wicker, because we thought that an idea is that the better cities, or the cities of the future, should integrate in some ways the countryside. That very big part of our humanity, our land, our globe, which seem to be now excluded from these cities where we are told that more and more people will live. So I think in some way we have to invent how to integrate the countryside in the city. And we are doing that, We are introducing parks. We are understanding how parks and built environment should integrate. It's not so useful to do an enormous park and then the city, because you need a certain dimension so that the people can go to the public space. Integrate public space where people can meet, where people can see each other, can invent some activities together. And everything is about also the dimension. So I think this is a kind of a question that many different professionals will give with different physical solutions. But I think it's very important to have a city which is trying to integrate the countryside. I don't know how. No? We have to think about it all together.
And Benedetta, I think that's a particularly beautiful thought to end on, because it also points to what good design is. And good design has that ability to solve many problems or deal with many issues at the same time. And in contrast to Venice, where a dam was supposed to do one thing, which it couldn't do and is doing nothing else, it's really a big failure. But the idea, if public space can be not only a place for people to gather, it can be an expression of culture, it can contribute to the quality of the natural environment, and as you say, if it can link us somehow our roots in the city to that 98% or 97% of the world which is non-city, then it seems to be doing a very good job. Benedetta Tagliabue, thank you so much for being with us. Please join me in thanking Benedetta.
Thank you, Marta. Fantastic.